Welcome to Tell Me More, the All Steel podcast where design meets innovation and we explore the limitless potential of workspaces. In this exclusive series, we're peeling back the layers of workplace design. From the psychology of colors to the future of hybrid work, join us as we open doors to conversations with industry leaders, architects, and designers who redefine the modern workplace. This is Tell Me More, brought to you by All Steel, because when it comes to designing the future, there's always more to discover. Welcome to the Doing More series. My name is Chelsea Compton. I am a member of the All Steel team, and joining me today is Peter Randolph. So Peter, we're thrilled to have you. To kick us off, would you briefly introduce yourself to those tuning in? Where are you from, and provide us with some insight into your career?
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Peter Randolph. I am an architect and a director at Geniant plus Eastlake Studio. We are a architecture and interior design firm in Chicago. I think we're hitting our 37th year this April,
Wow, it's exciting.
which is fortunately still older than I am by a little bit.
Awesome. So Peter, just curious, what inspired you to join the industry?
Well, for me, it's the only thing I've ever really been interested in, actually. And I
Okay.
think that architecture is one of those things that impacts everybody, and I think that can be said about a lot of different kind of creative fields, whether that's in culinary or fashion or in arts. But I think architecture is the one that takes on the most life after its creator has left the building, so to speak. So that there is a kind of a longevity, but also that it's a living document that people put their own meanings into after they inhabit it. So I think it was really exciting to have this idea of one that you can have an impact in the world, but also that the world speaks back to you through what you do.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So how long have you personally been in the industry yourself?
That is, well, it's a good question because I'm hitting a very accurate milestone soon. So it'll be 10 years I'll be at this particular firm in about 2 weeks. And then I have been in this industry for 12 years total.
Okay. So quite a bit of experience. Curious, can you share a project that you are particularly proud of, or what might make it stand out to you that you've been working on in the past or currently?
Sure. There's lots of things that we do and that we've done personally or here at the firm that I really love, but I think one that is most personal is we did the new headquarters for the Chicago Tribune newspaper a couple of years ago. And that was really personal to us. One that, we are a really proud Chicago firm. We really embrace our city. But then also we lived in the same building they lived in for 35 years or 30 years.
Fun.
So we were
Yeah.
our space was the old cartoonist space where they used to draw Dick Tracy and things like that. So they were our neighbors. They were our landlord. But they were a really interesting group of people. And when we got the opportunity to move their headquarters after they turned the building into condominiums, it was a really interesting exercise in, how do you design a space that is, pretty public in a way. It's a newspaper. It's meant to interact with the city, but also has a lot of internal kind of private functions. So what was really exciting about it was the amount of, hometown pride in a way, but also the amount of trying to really learn along with the client what they needed, what had to happen. It's a space that has studios, a space where they test recipes, a space where they write the paper, a space where they lay out the front page, a space where they have a room to interview Barack Obama. How do you design all those things with one kind of through line of consistent language? So it was a really exciting project and one that felt really in tune with the city, and one that was also a great chance to explore and not to arrive to it with not having your own defined we didn't know all the answers at the beginning, but we learned them along with them, which was immensely exciting.
That is cool. So you kind of mentioned that something that was really exciting about that project was that you got to work alongside of your client. When you're thinking about like your design aesthetic, would you say that you're inspired by something culturally or a movement, or would you say that when you approach a project that you're very client centered?
I think there's kind of two ways to approach that. I think one is, yes, we are very client focused. I'm very client focused. I think
Mhm.
there's two main ways of designing, and I draw it from fashion. There's either haute couture, where it is what it is, and you pick it up and that's it. And then there's sort of like a Savile Row kind of tailored. And I think I view myself much more as a kind of tailored architect, where
Okay.
there was a body, a program, a identity of who we are designing for that you apply to. And that doesn't mean that it's there's no design to it, that there's no hand of the architect, but much more that it is a conversation rather than an object or a product in a way. So, which is funny because I think, we think of tailoring as much more kind of commercial art than perhaps haute couture fashion, but really I think it involves a lot more conversation with the body, with the person, with the individual. So I think that's the way that I really like to design, the way I approach design. But if there's something that really inspires me, it's truthfully, it's the idea of grids. I'm a true like American designer, and I love, the idea that there is this sort of grid all across the United States, and that grid is, in one sense, kind of abstract, but also not neutral. That it,
Okay. Yeah.
how you inhabit it, how you to subdivide it is, there's endless innovation in that. So I think that's, the two ways I think about it is there's a very kind of abstract high level, there's a system that's in place that we all kind of live within, but that we, how do you, when it comes up to the individual body or the organization or the use, how does it kind of have that final molding? I think that's the part that gets really interesting to me.
So it's kind of a careful balance between, what the client's needs are and then anything that might have influenced you in your design.
Absolutely. I think that's really where the excitement in all design comes from, is that weird little bit of friction between, you know, gravity in a sense,
Okay.
what is true outside of you, the architect, outside of the client, outside of the particular project, and then what is true within you, within them. And there's always that little bit at the edges that's where the real, I think, excitement in design and interest comes from.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, switching gears just a little bit, I would love to learn a little bit more about your impact within your community. So, with that said, when we're thinking about architecture or design in your community, what type of opportunities inspire you? Is there anything that you have contributed to or maybe hope to contribute to in the future?
I think what's most exciting to me, and I think this is something we all got quite a glimpse into, especially during the COVID pandemic, is, a lot of our work traditionally has been in urban centers. And now
Okay.
that we think about, well, a lot of our lives really are much more satellite than that. And I think about, where I live in Chicago is a neighborhood called Uptown. And it was traditionally in the 1920s through the 40s, 50s, it was kind of a weird, very Al Capone-like satellite. There were film studios, there were cabarets, but it was sort of it was a different kind of center in a way. And there were different ways that people lived and worked there than perhaps, we designed for in the present day. It was kind of one of those early areas where would live, unmarried on their own, without family, without parents. So they kind of invented new typologies of residential space. There were new typologies of office space to serve industries that weren't financial or weren't manufacturing, but were more about um, performance arts and things that served this kind of new type of urban world. And I think we're kind of going back to that in a way because we are much more decentralized, because we don't have the kind of economy and family structure that was so dominant for about 50, 60, 70 years in this country, that we've kind of built all of our designs around. So I'm really excited about that, is kind of how can we engage and design in, these, I would say non-traditional because that's a kind of a loaded word, but I think non-normative or non average types of spaces. I think so. What we're trying to do with that is, we're getting much more into the world of designing retail, especially in cannabis. We're also starting to get back into multi-family residential work and understanding, the rubric of those spaces has been so long driven by, okay, if it's residential, it's designed for a nuclear family. If it's retail, it's designed for XYZ kinds of businesses. And those aren't really the case anymore. And that's in some ways a very good thing, because it means we have different kinds of people and actors and structures that are getting their say, and their real estate. And so I think that's what we're really excited about looking to in the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, is designing for the kind of the true kind of what retail and residential people who actually live there. Um,
Fascinating. I was unaware of the history of Uptown. I used to live in Chicago for a little bit, so that's really cool to hear.
It it is very funny, especially when you look at especially the old apartments, and it's
Yeah,
very odd to think about, they believe that if you were living on your own, of course you wouldn't cook. So they have these wonderful, elaborate closets that are very hidden, and you had this little room with a bed because if you Murphy bed because if you brought somebody up there and there was a bed in the room, it was very scandalous. And they had
okay.
these enormous public spaces, but then there was very small private spaces and no cooking because you did it outside, or you had maids, or you had this or that. So
Interesting.
it's very interesting to kind of
Yeah.
look back and say that was only 100 years ago, and it was as we were trying to figure out a new social structure, and I think we're in that same spot again, and it's a very exciting time to be designing.
That is really inspiring too. It seems like it's going to be meaningful work and kind of bring us more up to date with where we're at
Mhm.
in the modern world that we live in. So thank you for sharing that. You have quite a bit of experience and some great insight. So I'm curious, when we're thinking about individuals coming up in the industry, what is the best advice that you could share? Like, are there any lessons that you've learned throughout your career that you wish someone might have shared with you earlier?
Well, I think there was a very good lesson. Somebody already shared it with me, so I'll share it again. Is
Okay.
just to be fearless. I think that applies in many different ways across your entire career. And
Mhm.
when I heard it, it was when I was in school, and they were telling me, you were going to have to come across uh, ways of drawing, types of projects to think about that you're not going to know the answer, and you could be afraid, and you could go back to what you know and do
Mhm.
that over, or you could just jump into it and be fearless and try to learn. And I think that's the advice that carries me through, and I think it carries some of our best work through. I think our best projects are the ones where we don't have all the answers, and we have to go in with this sort of confidence in our ability to learn, but a fearlessness in that we're operating without a net a little bit, that we have to, trust in our experience, trust our clients, trust our professionals around us, to find a new answer. I think that's how the only way that we're ever going to advance, our practice, advance, architecture, and the only way we're ever going to be able to meet new challenges is to be fearless about not falling back on what we already know to be true.
Yeah, I like that. So just to kind of summarize, like be bold, take risks. That's the a great way for you to learn.
Yes, and to rely on the people around you who know more than you, and don't
Yeah,
be afraid of asking for help and asking for advice and asking what others think.
asking questions. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a fabulous way to learn, and I think it shows that you're curious too as you're coming up in the industry. So we've talked about your career, your community impact, and you've shared some insight with us. As we're wrapping up our conversation, is there anything else that you can think of that you might want to share or that we haven't talked about, or a way that listeners can follow or connect with you?
Absolutely. I think more than ever, it is the responsibility of those of us who are in the industry to um, support, to mentor, and to elevate those who are coming up in the industry. I think
Mhm.
that's been a really difficult period in the past 5 years with the rising cost of education. It's growing, it's more and more inaccessible. And with, the past 3, 4 years where students were working remotely,
Yeah.
without in classroom experience, without those kind of connections that we all took for granted 10, 15 years ago. I think that so if there's anything I could ever, a charge to myself and a charge to others is that to spread our knowledge and our networks and our gifts and as much as we possibly can, and to lift up those around us. It's really hard. We don't always succeed. um, but it's the kind of drumbeat that I try to have in the back of my head every day. We can be found on eastlakestudio.com, which you can find
Okay.
all of our socials, our LinkedIn, our Instagram. We don't have a TikTok yet, but we're trying.
You're thinking
God
about
bless.
it? Good
We have
luck.
a
It's in
few.
the East.
Yeah, we have some passionate people. So maybe you'll see us on TikTok one day, but so far just Instagram and our website.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to keeping up with everything that you're working on. Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you spending time with us, and sharing your insight for our Doing More series. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful weekend.
You as well. And that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of Tell Me More. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of design and innovation. If you're hungry for more insights and stories, make sure to subscribe to Tell Me More on your preferred podcast platform. As we sign off, remember that the conversation doesn't end here. Connect with us on social media at Allsteel and share your thoughts, questions, or even your favorite moments from the podcast. We love hearing from our engaged and curious audience. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue exploring the Design to Do More philosophy. Until then, thanks for listening.